they have been 8-4 since June 1st and 8-2 in their last 10 games. And they've beaten some quality opponents. Now we'll see what ends up happening here with the Diamondbacks if they're able to win 3 of 4 and then go to Oakland and sweep a middling Athletics team.
I tell you what, they've only won 19 games.
I mean, you're talking about bad baseball here.
So,
if you lose any of those games, you got to question your club a little bit.
I don't like West Coast road trips. However, here's the situation. So far, we've split with the Diamondbacks. We play 2 more because you're bringing this up, so I wanted to show you. We play tonight at 9:40, and tomorrow's the getaway game to Oakland. We go 3:40 in the afternoon on Thursday. Then we've got this upcoming weekend, Father's Day weekend against Oakland, which I didn't realize at the time, but there's a reason why they probably want to move to Vegas. Well, actually, several. But the A's are terrible.
They're really bad.
There is no reason, and I don't care if we have a fifth. I don't even care if we have 4 starters.
Yeah.
You should win all 3 of those darn games.
And the first game is going to be that question mark who's pitching game.
Yeah.
So sometimes if you do lose that first game against a bad club, that gets a bad taste in everybody's mouth. The doldrums come in, and then next thing you know, you're losing to a really bad team.
Yeah, but and that should not happen.
I think no way they lose any of those games out in Oakland.
I think in order for me to say, okay, this team is good, and I'm going to feel good about them going into the All-Star break, you have to split with the Diamondbacks, which means you got to go 1-1 here.
Yep.
You better sweep the A's. I'm sorry.
Agreed.
You've got to do it. Well, it is weather wagers time here as we cruise through June. Happy first day of summer to you, David.
Happy summer.
It is the summer solstice here, and we are excited as we head into the summer. We've got lots to talk about. Mr. Tommaso still away. He is on his paternity leave. So, Dave, thanks for sitting in. And
anytime.
I had to start with that cold open because we had talked about how the Phillies needed to make some noise on their road trip last week if they had any hope of trying to make a playoff run. We felt it was critical. They had a good setup going into last week, and not to pat ourselves on the back, but we will. It's what good forecasters do.
Yep.
And not only did they not split with the Diamondbacks, they took 3 out of 4 from a very hot team. Mm-hmm. And then they swept the A's. Terrible baseball team, but we needed to do it. We're going to get into the fact that they now play some important divisional games this week and weekend. We're going to talk all about that here coming up in just a little bit. But first, we will talk, too, about how you can find us, and we'll pull that up as usual. We thank you for joining us. You can always get us, and we want to hear from you. Dan and I always like to hear from you as to what you want us to talk about and cover, and you can find us at weatherwagers@gmail.com. And one of the things we've been hearing about is the exciting college football schedules that are coming out next season when everything expands, the playoff expands, the Big Ten and SEC expand, and Dave and I are going to talk about them. You can keep up with Dan and I, Facebook, meteorologist Brett Thackera, and Dan Tommaso at Doppler Dan. Give him a shout-out. Let him know you're thinking of him. And, of course, on Instagram, Doppler Dan as well, and I'm Brett Thack, ABC27. So the first thing, too, we want to do is give Mr. Dan a shout-out, too, because we haven't.
Look at that.
We have not done that here on the podcast yet. This is the reason why he hasn't been with us here the last several weeks. He had a baby, and what a great photo, Dave, that is. Colette Ann Tommaso, born on May 31st. And I believe that is one day ahead of his wife, Brittany, there, who's looking lovely as well, right after the birth there. Dan grinning away in that photo. It's a great shot, and we certainly want to give them a shout-out here because he misses being here, but he is keeping tabs on us.
Oh, yeah, and I think also helped spark a little bit of the Phillies' run here. As of June 1st, they kind of got their stuff together, so to speak, and that's just so happens when Dan was watching games with a baby daughter.
Yes, and she sits on his lap during the Phillies games. He holds her. She takes some naps, and you got to start them early.
Hey, if you don't get them early, you can't do it your whole life, right?
My son did the same with me, and now he's a fan. My daughter claims she doesn't like baseball and that it's boring, but she's 5. There's time.
Well, there's something to be said. My son is named Chase, and he was born in 2008. So I'm not saying. I'm saying.
I'm saying that maybe he was named after the great Chase Utley.
Possibly. He wears number 26, too, in lacrosse. So,
that's probably,
it all comes full circle.
That's probably a good bet.
Not bad.
But we do want to give a shout-out to the Tomasos and Colette, and we miss him, but he'll be back in a few weeks. So Dave's going to hold down the fort, and we certainly do appreciate that. So now, before we talk about the Phillies and what's been going on with them, we do want to talk about, again, the forecast. And Major League Baseball, of course, is coming up this weekend with some important series. So let's talk about that, the Mets and the Phillies. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the Braves and the Phillies, but we like to give a preview for, if you're going to be maybe thinking about placing a bet on some series this weekend, what the weather impact is. And as you know, we talk a lot about it with Dan and I on this podcast. So the Mets and Phillies are going to have an issue Friday, Saturday, and potentially Sunday. And Dave, the Mets, as we have mentioned, not only do they have issues across their whole franchise right now, but they've had the most rainouts of any team, and that looks to continue. They're bringing bad luck to the Phillies this weekend with weather.
And we've kind of had some bad luck against the Mets, too. I believe we have not won a series with the Mets since 2021.
Well, listen, now's the time to do it.
If you don't do it now, then like we kind of said about the A's coming in, if you don't take care of business when you're supposed to,
correct,
then you're not going to get ahead in these standings right now.
I don't like to kick a horse when it's down, but if that horse is the Mets, well, it's time.
Yeah.
The Mariners at the Orioles. The Orioles are having a great season, and we don't cover a lot about the Orioles here. It's just not what we do.
The Orioles.
When we can talk big picture and talk about weather and just at least make a comment that they're making some noise in the AL East.
Yeah, they're looking a lot better than the 60-win teams of the last couple of years. I think they kind of were on the come up last year, flirting with the 500 record. But now,
they've got some young
force
studs
to be reckoned with right now.
Yes, and especially with
in a tough division too.
Yes, and they're going to have some issues with weather all weekend long, as are the Yankees. Speaking of that, you take advantage. The Orioles take advantage of the Yankees. What's going on in New York? They stink.
Yeah, but yet again, we're talking about that division that's got some heavy hitters in it right now, and especially when you have the teams that are known to be in the basement making some noise, it makes for the evil empire to have a tougher go of it, as they say.
And as Dan would say, baseball is so streaky, too. If the Yankees have hope of going on a run, they better get to it before the All-Star break. And then the Red Sox and White Sox may have issues on Sunday. So we're going to take you through the forecast here. One of the reasons that these teams may have some issues is that the East Coast has been dealing with this upper-level low, which will actually give us here in Central PA some much-needed rain going into the weekend, starting really tonight. And we're recording this on Wednesday, but we also do expect daily shower chances Thursday, Friday. But the Phillies and the Mets are in Philadelphia. That's the advantage the Phillies have playing at CBP. But each day, they may be faced with at least some delays, if not a rainout Friday. Now, remember, this is not a high-res model. This is one of the longer-range models. So it's just indicating there's a chance of showers and storms Friday evening. That is when the Phillies have the Mets. And then again, Saturday afternoon and evening. And again, Sunday afternoon and evening. And also, there's going to be a few showers around Chicago. As we mentioned, the Red Sox travel to the White Sox on this weekend as well. That's the series there. They should be in the clear Friday and Saturday, but my concern for that game would be Sunday afternoon. There could be a passing shower. But the Phillies, the Orioles, and as we mentioned, the Yankees, it is pretty clear here from this graphic that each day is going to feature a chance of a shower or a thunderstorm. And as we also know, that could mess up game times, game start times. There could be some rain delays this weekend if you're watching, traveling, attending any of those games. We've got Orioles fans here. We've got Phillies fans. We know there's Yankee fans. Just keep that in mind, that it's going to be an unsettled weekend for East Coast baseball. So that is a look at the forecast. Keep it in mind this weekend along the East Coast. So now one of the things we've been doing is talking about the Phillies' upcoming schedule. Again, not to toot our own horn, we did a decent job with projecting their West Coast run. Mm-hmm. Then they come home last night and they drop the ball against the Braves. So let me ask you this first of all. Just in terms of doing what they needed to do out west, that's what a good team and a playoff team and somebody that wants to hang around in October needed to do, right? It needed to really beat a good team on the road like it did with the Diamondbacks and then sweep a terrible team in Oakland, and they did it.
Yeah, you got to get the wins when you're supposed to. I know the cliche is just keep winning series, and they still have that opportunity here against the Braves and the Mets, albeit if they get the Mets games in. But I wasn't too upset that they dropped the game last night, but in classic Phillies fashion, there was just a couple little miscues that led to it.
Yeah, because they actually looked pretty good to start
Suarez
that game.
looked awesome.
But this is a series that's important because I always say if you want to be the best, you've got to beat the best, and you measure yourself against dominant teams. We talk about it with college football. If Penn State wants to take that next step, it better beat Michigan and Ohio State, or at least one of them. If the Phillies really want to get their fans pumped and hopeful that they can make an actual World Series run this year. By the way, I know we just did last year, and we ran into a Houston team, but you got the feeling then so far this spring that they're just not one of they're not in that upper echelon yet, right? They're good, they're scrappy, they've got a lot of talent, but can they just be one of those more dominant teams? Well, if you want to do that, you've got to beat the Braves.
True.
They can still do that. I mean, also, they were probably due to lose a game.
They were, and we kind of fell on an odd bullpen situation, too. Alvarado, Marte, and Strom were all not available for last night's game, so you bring in Hoffman and Vasquez, and they're the ones that gave up the runs to get us behind the 8-ball.
It was a weird bullpen situation last night, but there again, you've got Ranger Suarez pitching his lights out. He looked great. Gives up the 1-run homer, and then you have Phillies just leaving men on base again.
Yep.
And then you have Ranger getting himself out of the jam, getting out of the 6th, I think it was, and then you've got the bullpen coming in, and right away, boom, they give up the Olsen home run. And the game is tied, and then from there it just got out of hand, and you're thinking, okay, this is the old Phillies, the old bullpen. Now again, they were due for a loss, but my question is to you: they answered the bell out west, feeling pretty good. Now coming home, can they make some noise in the division? Now, before you answer, let's look at the schedule again. We've got the Braves here tonight, really, and again on Thursday. Not a getaway game, but an afternoon business person special at 1:05. Yes, and then the Mets this weekend. As I mentioned, that's going to have some weather impact to it. An upper-level low is going to bring showers and thunderstorm chances nearly every day. You've got your 7 o'clock Apple TV Plus time slot on Friday, your 4:05 on Saturday, and your afternoon Sunday game at 1:35. And then next week, they've got to travel to Chicago to take on the Cubbies for 3 straight, and they'll follow that up coming back home, another divisional series against the Nationals. That's a series they should sweep.
Yep.
We're gonna save the end of June schedule for the end of June, but let's talk about these next 2 series. Can the Phillies make some noise in the division? Because Dave, we had a winning streak going here. We've played great baseball in June. We've played some teams out west that we were able to dismantle. Guess what? The Braves have been keeping right up with us. We haven't gained anything in the division.
Yeah.
We've gained in the wild card. We feel good about the team. Can they take advantage of these divisional series now?
Well, they have to, and that's the thing. I believe the last series with the Braves we did split. That was a 4-game series. We went 2-2. You got to win 2 out of 3 here against the Braves. If you do win 1 out of 3, then you have to sweep the Mets, and especially with the downward trend that the Mets are going with. The problem is we haven't done it. The Mets have been the thorn in our side, very much like the Marlins have been in years past, where these teams aren't necessarily good, but have the Phillies number for some reason. And that's really the disheartening aspect of it all. But hopefully they're not looking ahead too far, and because the Cubs and the Nationals should be easy series wins as well. And you hope that you at least sweep one of those teams.
Well, yeah, and I think it would probably be the Nationals. It's always tough to play on the road. I mean, the Cubbies aren't great. I don't think they're bad.
No, but like I said, series wins is what you're looking for. You got over the 500 schneid. Now you just need to get those one game at a time, and next thing you know, you're back in the playoff race. I believe they're a game and a half out at this point right now.
Right, for the wild card. But again, we had expected this team to compete in this division.
Exactly.
The Braves looked good again last night. They are consistent, and I think when we talk about the inconsistencies, it shows up with the Phillies constantly. It shows up with the way that we hit. We can go on streaks, the way each individual player performs. We left a lot of men on base last night. We hadn't been doing that most of June. That was what we were doing for most of the spring. And then Aaron Nola's inconsistencies. We've talked about that. We did have, at least last year, bullpen inconsistencies. That showed up again last night. Again, it was an odd night. We were probably due to lose a game. But, I mean, if you want to be the best,
got to beat the best.
Then you better go into this series and take the next 2 games. I don't want to hear any excuses now. Do you think we're going to really be able to do that?
I think so. That game was close last night, and they even had a shot to win it there. I believe they scored one in the ninth, the bottom of the ninth, but there was also a miscue in the eighth where JT had a single, tried to leg out a double that would have put the tying run on base, and
by the way,
out at second.
I want to talk about that because, and again, if you're listening to us over the weekend, you got to think back. This was Tuesday night's Phillies-Braves game. One of the first times that I saw review used very effectively. I don't think they got it right, and maybe I'm showing my bias here, but they had a very close call at second base, and JT claimed that the tag was late. He got his hand in. The video, to me, showed that. I don't think the glove touched him. The umpires left the call stand. Now, maybe they couldn't see it. I could see it as clear as day. They showed it on the big board, the Philly Vision board. What am I missing? If you're not going to get the call right, why are we having it? I know they also have Mr. John Kruk. They've been counting, number of days without a nuclear incident, number of days he's really trying to bite his tongue.
Yep.
I didn't bite my tongue last night. I thought it was another egregious call. I thought he was safe.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are questioning the fact that, like, at this point in the game, you just need to get some men on base so that you can get a couple more runs here to make it a tie game. Now,
right.
I love that JT has that hustle and is trying to
I like
make
the aggressiveness
happen.
Yep.
But, you never want to make that first or last out at second or third base. That's always the mantra, and you can't do that when you're trying to at least come back from which was a reasonable game at that point. You just need to string up a couple runs, and you're back in it here.
Yeah, and again, that I'm not blaming the officials for us losing the game. That the Phillies lost, and there was a lot of issues with that. My point just continues to be: we have review for a reason. If you're going to waste my time and review a call, then you better get it right. Now, listen. If the tag was in and the call was right, fine, review it. It was right.
Yep.
Don't change it. To me, it was obvious that they missed the guy missed him. But again, I'll let that go. I can complain about the umpires. I don't have to bite my tongue like
they had plenty of other opportunities with men on base, a couple one-out opportunities with somebody on third. They couldn't even get the pop fly in there,
Correct.
So, I mean, it wasn't just that one play, obviously.
No, it was. But again, I feel bad for Rangers for us. He pitched a heck of a game.
And he has been pitching, I believe right now, in the last 32 and 2/3 innings, his ERA is 1.38. I mean, you can't ask anything more out of your starter.
And he is a likable guy, isn't he? He's a likable guy. And so anyway, that's where you've got to get Ranger the run support that he needs. All right,
exactly.
Now, we talked last week about part of the reason we felt the Phillies were struggling going into that road trip was you made the point they don't have a fifth starter.
Correct.
And that they probably should, and that this is something that would help them become elevated to the point where they can start winning some of these big series and continue the hot streak that has brought them all the way in June. Now, Dan Tomaso texted me an article, and I want to give a shout out.
Still keeping his finger on the pulse.
He's still keeping his finger on the pulse, and this was so good that I thought we would cite it on the podcast here. It's written by Destiny Lugardo. You can find her on Twitter. She writes for Phillies Nation, and I want to read you a little bit of this article and have you respond to it. It's not necessarily arguing your point, but she's also making the point, you know what? We may not actually need a fifth starter. Here's why. She writes in this article, fifth starters are a dying breed in the year 2023. Shoulder and elbow injuries are on the rise, and for some reason, finding and developing reliable starting pitching is harder than it's ever been. I agree with that statement.
Correct.
It may not seem this way to those who view baseball from a Philly-centric perspective, but the Phillies may have one of the best pitching situations in the sport. Consider this. They are fifth in baseball with 35 starts of at least 6 innings or more from their rotation. They are in the bottom 3 of the sport when it comes to the number of relief outings of at least an inning and a third at 41. The top 6, the Rockies, A's, Reds, Tigers, Yankees, and Cardinals, are all pitching starved teams. That tells you that the Phillies aren't scrambling to get through 9 innings every night the way that other clubs are. I would agree with that, too. It's obvious that our guys can go. Even Ranger last night pitched 6.
Got you solid 6, for sure. And it was a won one game when he exited.
Correct, and he gave up the one dinger, but again, he still was getting himself out of jams. So I think she makes a great point there. Now, concerns surrounding the number 5 spot are way overblown. 5th starter is far from the Phillies' biggest need at the trade deadline. Remember, that's at the end of July.
Correct.
And I can even go so far as to say that the Phillies may be better off with not even bothering to trade for a back-end starter. The Phillies instead need to focus on acquiring players that will be expected to contribute to a run for the championship come October. It's why the Phillies need to be at least intrigued by the idea of acquiring a star hitter like Paul Goldschmidt.
Yep.
A dream scenario would be a trade for an ace, a Corbin Burns or Dylan Cease type that could potentially replace one or both Aaron Nola or Zach Wheeler, who are set to become free agents in the near future. That's an interesting take, but at best, a club's 5th starter becomes a good multi-inning reliever in the playoffs. At worst, they're either pitching in garbage time or kept off the player roster entirely. She then says, last year the Phillies needed to acquire talent at the deadline in order to turn a good roster into a playoff roster. This year it's not about breaking a playoff drought, it's about winning a championship. And again, the article contains a lot more information. I just wanted to read some highlights. And the last part says, the Phillies, as currently constructed, are not in desperate need of a 5th starter to patch things up. It's time for the Phillies and Phillies fans to think bigger. And again, that was written by Destiny Lugardo from Phillies Nation. And she is, I think she's at Destiny_Lugardo. Just something Dan sent me. I wanted to give her a shout out here, because you can read the full column at Phillies Nation. But, Dave, this is exactly what you and I were talking about. Now, she makes the argument, in order to make a World Series run, because this year, not only do we want to get there, we'd like to win. I mean, that's the next goal here. Maybe a 5th starter isn't necessary, especially considering, look at what everybody else is doing. Maybe we need to go and get somebody. So let's reverse it this week. We thought, and you made some really sapient points about the starting rotation last week, and it would seem like, okay, that's what we need. Now this week, here comes Ranger, and we could have used 3 or 4 more runs.
Yeah.
Maybe you go out and get a guy that swings.
Well, and it's an unlikely situation over there in St. Louis right now that Goldschmidt's even talked about leaving their program.
Right.
So the fact that that's even an option and someone that they should target.
Wouldn't that be wild?
That would be. And around this time last year, I believe, is when we acquired Noah Syndergaard, right? And he slid into that 5 slot.
She makes that point in the article, too.
He did his job. He came up with some big games, 8 up innings. But I think the big thing you got to remember is, right now, 4 of the top 6 prospects in the minor leagues for the Phillies are right-handed pitchers. And one of those, and Andrew Painter, was supposed to be up here at some point. Now, we're dealing with some injuries here and there.
Right.
But you have some people waiting in the wings. Are the Phillies management trying not to trade for that 5th starter because they have hopes that these guys are going to eventually step up?
Well, and that is the hope. She also mentions Painter in the article, too. They want a slow build. But even if they build him back slowly, could he be ready by August or the end of August?
Well, is it going to be too late at that point?
Well, you hope not. I mean, I don't think so. I think the way that we're playing now, if he would be ready by August, September, then that gets you into the playoff situation. Yeah. And again, listen, injury or not, if he's as good as we think he is.
Yeah.
Okay. And then next year he may end up replacing Nola or somebody else.
Yeah, you never know.
Just had that discussion, too.
Exactly.
So give me a prediction here as we wrap up our Phillies chatter for the week. Can they win both series against the Braves and the Mets before going on the road to the Cubbies next week?
I believe they're probably – I think they're probably going to win both series. So I believe they'll get the next 2. I can't see them sweeping the Mets. As much as I think they should be able to, that there's something about the Mets that we just haven't. Now, I'd be happy with just winning a series because we have not done that since 2021.
Against the Mets.
Against the Mets.
And
so that's why you
have
to try to get 2 against the Braves here and hope that you take care of business when you need to.
I am not as optimistic. Just something about this Braves team says that they are a notch above us. I think we're going to go 1-2 against Atlanta, and then I think we can take 2 out of 3. I'm with you. We should be able to sweep the Mets, but there's something about the Mets that, again, is a thorn in our side. So I think if we go 1-2 against the Braves and we go 2-1 against the Mets, that's 4-2. So it's still a winning record in the division. We'll take it. But I would like to see us put up more of a fight against Atlanta. I like your optimism. I'm not sure it's going to work out that way, but we'll see what happens. They certainly have their opportunities. And then keep an eye, as we just mentioned too, weather wagers. The weather is going to be a factor for that Mets series this weekend at Citizens Bank Park. So if any of you out there are heading to the park, bring your poncho and bring your patience, because there could be some delays or even some games that are pushed back. I wouldn't be surprised if part of that series becomes a day-night doubleheader.
Well, so do they even have the option to get that in?
That I don't know either.
Because if it's going to be hanging around all weekend.
It's going to be very hit or miss. I think that they can probably do it. I would expect some delays, but and also maybe pushing one to a day-night doubleheader. We'll see what happens. And they may have to end up rescheduling it till another series. Because remember, the Phillies have not played any of these teams much yet.
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
We need to make some headway in the division here.
Yes, and we just haven't played many divisional games. So stay tuned on that, as the weather will be a factor. So one of the other things that we have talked about is college football. And, David, as we pivot to that, the SEC and the Big Ten have released their 2024 schedules now. Keep in mind a couple of things. In the SEC, Texas and Oklahoma start next season.
Correct.
Okay, so we're not talking
2024.
about. Yep, we're not talking about this upcoming fall. We're talking about next year in 2024. So Texas and Oklahoma move in. The SEC has stuck with 8 games for now. The Big Ten, which already plays 9 games, they welcome in USC and UCLA from the West Coast. So this is going to give us all kinds of different matchups. But keep this in mind. Fans are clamoring, saying, oh, man, that could give us an extra loss or 2. Well, guess what? Also next season, the playoff expands to 12. We're not ignoring 2023. We've been over that on this podcast. We've looked at Penn State's schedule. We've talked about some Week 1 games. We're not done with that yet either. We've talked about a lot. But now, with these schedule releases here in the last couple of weeks, I wanted to go and show everybody what we're talking about. So I've highlighted some games for you, and I want your reaction to these. Georgia, although we've made fun of their schedule this year, they've got some games on here, man, that look pretty tough to me. They've got to go to Bryant-Denny in 2024. That's during the regular season. How about Alabama at Oklahoma? Nick Saban's not getting off easy in 24, is he?
No, not at all. And I think this whole new realignment, I mean, if you look at what Oklahoma had to play last year and went 6-7, and what they're going to have to play just in division, I got it right here. Oklahoma's going to have Bama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, bringing the Red River rivalry back into town.
Yeah, say that 3 times fast.
Not very easily. Which you got to remember, that game was played from 1915 to 2011 and hasn't.
No, and then they, it's the Red River Shootout, but they changed it to the Red River Rivalry.
Yeah, we all know what it really is.
We can't even say that other one. So, but you're right, and
they still have to deal with Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, and Missouri. I mean, that is not the same as a Big 12 lineup.
It's not. Now, they struggled last year. I think that is one of the questions: is can Brent Venables turn this around? I think by the recruiting, I also don't think that Brent Venables forgot how to coach.
You hope not.
But, again, when Lincoln Riley leaves...
It takes half your team.
It takes half your team. You're going to be without Jimmys and Joes.
For sure.
I'm going to be interested to see if Brett Venables can turn things around this year. If he does, I think they'll be okay. But, again, listen, if you're a 3-loss SEC team, before that's disqualifying. Now you could make a 12-team playoff. So when you're looking at some of these matchups and you're thinking, man... Nick Saban's getting screwed. I mean, Nick Saban thinks he is. But, again, a 3-loss Alabama team might make the playoff.
It's possible.
Another interesting matchup here. Now, Florida's been down, but, I mean, you look at these are – when you're talking about brand names and helmet games, and I know everybody says, well, we like tradition and we like – I do too, and I don't like everything that's happening with this sport. But, man, you're going to give me Florida at Texas.
Yeah.
Georgia at Texas.
Yeah.
These are fun games, right?
Yeah.
During the regular season.
And we're talking about some of the most winningest programs of all time,
These are the biggest brands.
But is Texas back?
Well, everybody says they can win the Big 12 this year.
Out.
That's another team. If Texas or Oklahoma is competing for a Big 12 title this year, they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
I'm not sure either program, though, is going to be ready to handle, as you pointed out, this schedule. Another fun game, Oklahoma at LSU. When's the last time that happens? These are bowl game matchups. Now they're in the regular season.
These sound like some old school BCS championship games almost.
Yes, that's exactly right. Bob Stoops, Nick Saban, Les Miles at LSU.
Yep.
Missouri at A&M. This one I put on there not because Missouri's doing anything great these days, but that's an old Big 12 rivalry that's going to be renewed with this schedule.
So weird to see that, right?
It is, and now it's in the SEC. How about Tennessee and Oklahoma? You know why this one has significance? Who's the Tennessee coach? Josh Heupel.
Yes.
Former championship-winning quarterback at Oklahoma.
Yep. Got some ties there.
There was some bad terms that they left on, but I heard a call on the Feinbaum show this week that a guy called in and he said, "What can we do to stop Josh Heupel from going back to Oklahoma?" So it's interesting. Tennessee fans are a little worried that if Brett Venables doesn't turn things around, Oklahoma may sniff around Josh Heupel. There was some bad blood there, but like Feinbaum responded, that can go away pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on the situation. First of all, the same people aren't there. Money talks.
I was going to say paycheck might
And
clear all wounds, you know?
I'm not sure there's anything you can do to stop a guy from going to his alma mater to coach, right?
Yeah, we've seen it before, and we even talk about Harbaugh getting their Michigan man, and
look at Kirby.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's always kind of waiting there for some of these coaches that have ties to other programs, especially in this SEC where they're constantly trying to keep up to the Saban kind of
Dynamic,
exactly. And he's pretty much the only one that's stuck around through all these last couple decades here.
But man, I mean, that could be a fun, intense forever. Can you imagine if Tennessee goes into Norman and whoops Oklahoma next season? What that's going to do?
Yeah, it gets at least the fan base is fired up, and we can start looking to the future of what these matchups are really going to look like.
Oklahoma at Auburn, they've got to go to Jordan Hare, and then of course, listen, another fun one. Texas A&M has to go to the Swamp. That's not one that happens every year, so these are fun matchups. But the biggest one too that stands out to me, one of the most hated rivalries in sports that again took a backseat to money and conference realignment. Texas at Texas A&M. It's back next season, everybody. How much fun is that going to be?
Like I said, I mean, it seems almost uncanny that it's been 13 years since they've played. Like, that just seems crazy because that was such a staple, and that deep into the when they normally play that
Thanksgiving,
November,
it was rivalry weekend. So
I think it's good that they are getting some of these, matchups together. It's just so weird to have it be under the SEC moniker.
It is going to be weird, but it is. You think of it as a Big 12 classic Midwestern affair, and now it's going to be under the SEC brand. So you can probably watch that game or many of these right here on ABC when that contract starts in 2024. Now, how about the Big 10? This is going to be fun, too, because they release their schedule. So let's talk about some of these highlighted games. And these are just good games. Some games we've seen before, but others are new. Iowa is going to have a tough slate. They've got to go to Ohio State and to USC. How about that matchup, Iowa at USC? And the reason I find that interesting is, again, not that I feel bad for Iowa, because believe me, I don't. But you've got the rough and tumble, old school Big Ten, grind them out defense against Lincoln Riley's high-flying Hollywood offense. It's an interesting matchup that, again, typically would be a Rose Bowl matchup.
Very true.
Now, it's in season.
Yeah, yet again, we're talking about this West Coast Big Ten game that just doesn't sound right,
No.
But yeah, you always want to see how these matchups kind of come to fruition, and usually you don't get to see them until the bowl games, like you were saying. To have them mid-season, it's kind of cool.
It is kind of fun.
Curious to see what's going to win out, the defense or the offense aspect of it all.
You want big brands playing big brands. So Michigan has to go to USC in 24. Wisconsin at Michigan, two big brands. Now, again, that game we've seen before, but it's not played every year because, remember, divisions are going away. There are going to be no more divisions. That was a game that didn't happen every year because Michigan was in the East, Wisconsin in the West. Well, now it can happen more often, and Wisconsin at Michigan should be a good game. Now, Ohio State at Penn State, that is not going to happen every year. It is happening in 24, though.
In fact, didn't they just instill this 2 plays where basically it's a home and home series for 2 years, and then it's rotating as they go? So I believe we don't play Michigan again until 2025.
Correct.
Right?
So that's
they are
the one.
not part of the first 2 play.
Yep. And there are some teams that will play rivals every year. Penn State just happens to be unrivaled.
Well,
that's the slogan.
Way to be punny there.
So because of that, we don't play anybody every year, but that's okay with me. I'll take the rotation. I know some people are upset we lose the Ohio State game every year. Why? I'm not.
If it helps you kind of stay a little clean for 1 year.
We lost to them every year. Get them out of there. I mean, now it's going to be fun. They come to Happy Valley in 24. Yeah. And then here's another one we don't see often. Penn State at Camp Randall. They go to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That's a fun game. Jump around. Now, this is a game, too. If you're an athletic director, Pat Kraft, you got to love it. USC at Penn State. Two big brands.
Yeah.
USC.
I mean, it's a Rose Bowl, like you said. It's crazy to have this midseason.
But could that be the whiteout next year? See, that's what I'm saying.
That
Imagine that atmosphere.
Yeah, heck of a game.
Look at you. I can see it. The
I'm
glint
already
in your
kind
eye.
of fired up.
I mean, that's what I mean. These schedule releases, you can hype them up all you want, and many of us may just roll our eyes. But when you actually start to think about it and feel it, football fans know this probably is going to be better. I mean, these are made for TV matchups, but also imagine if that's the whiteout going up there tailgating. USC's in town.
Yeah,
that's fun.
That's fun. That's a lot of fun.
UCLA has to go to Michigan. Wisconsin has to. I mean, USC has the home games. They get Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin at home. That's a slate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fun slate. UCLA has to go to Michigan. And then, again, here's another game. We haven't seen it too often since Nebraska joined the Big Ten. You talk about old school, 1990, Tom Osborne, Joe Paterno, hard knocks of just good old-fashioned fullback dives.
Yep.
Nebraska at Penn State. That's in 24. So Matt Rule, we'll see what he can do this year.
Them turned around, and that is a bigger game than it has been the last couple of years.
I think it could be. I think in general, though, it's fun, and that's a game that Penn State gets home. So look at that list, and you tell me, is it better? I mean, it's less traditional, but is it better? I think an argument can be made, no, but I also think an argument can be made, heck yes, it's better. Look at those games.
Yeah, it's an awesome slate, and I think the Big Ten's going to run into kind of what the SEC is running into here with all of these kind of big game matchups. Have we lost the undefeated team in a division? Do you think that's going to be a thing?
I think you're going to have some elite teams every year that can probably be undefeated, but I think it's going to be a lot tougher. I think you're going to see 1- and 2-loss teams duking it out, and then you're going to see a 3-loss team sneak in there now.
Yeah, especially when you're going coast to coast like this.
Correct. That's what happens when you get better games, you get more travel, and you expand things, and you expand the playoff. Now, imagine some of the tailgating scenes here.
Oh, yeah.
Just real quick, favorite food and drink, because it's the first day of summer. It's never too early to think about fall. What's your favorite food and drink to tailgate with?
So, as you know, I'm a
George Dickel whiskey.
Well, that has been at a tailgate or two.
Yes.
I am a connoisseur of smoked meats. So, as long as there's some kind of, like chicken wings, burgers, dogs, whatever. But my go-to, homemade mac and cheese. With some of those meats, whatever it be, and then a good old cold beer with a sidecar whiskey. That is my tailgate.
Little chaser.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm good with all of that. I think you've got to have nachos at a tailgate.
Okay.
And wings. I want somebody to smoke the chicken wings. You get that. And then I think at Penn State when I go, give me the Yingling.
Yep.
Okay. Good old fashioned Yingling, and I could get down with a whiskey or two.
Yeah.
Crown Royal makes a peach whiskey.
Oh yes. Yes.
You ever had that?
I have had some of the flavors. It does its job for sure.
It does more than that. It tastes like
juice. The big thing is you need to make sure that you can always have a drink in one hand and a food in the other. So it's got to be easy eating with one hand.
We need to show the Southern California people, I don't even know if they're allowed to tailgate, but we need to show them how it's done when they come next year. That's the fun thing, that you're going to be welcoming in some new teams to Happy Valley, and teams that, like Wisconsin or, we go on the road there, but Nebraska, teams that haven't been to Happy Valley in a while. That's a fun slate.
Oh, yeah.
Now, before we go, we are talking about week 1. It's the first day of summer when we're recording this. It's never too early to talk. They have lines up.
Uh-oh.
Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay. Now, I don't think have you peeked at these yet?
I have not.
Okay.
I'm doing a blind read here.
Okay, blind read. So we go week 0, Navy, Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame, remember, Ken Niumatalolo is out.
Yes.
I forget who the Navy coach is, but it's somebody different, and they have been struggling. This isn't that much of a surprise that Notre Dame is favored. I am shocked they're almost a 3-touchdown favorite. They are favored by 20 points. And that is the game that kicks off the season on August 26th. That seems like a high line, doesn't it?
A little bit.
Especially when they've struggled against bad teams, Notre Dame.
And Navy's also a team that tends to control the clock. So sometimes points are at a premium when you play some of the service academies.
Yeah, it's an interesting line. I mean, if I had to just think about what I would do now, and remember, Dan and I will be picking these as we move forward into next year. Because I have to avenge my loss. That seems like a high number.
Yeah, but as we've said before, these guys in the desert usually know what they're talking about.
Unfortunately, yes, they sure do, and many of us have been bitten once or twice.
Yes, once or twice.
Now, Florida's got to go to play the Utes. I do like this line. It is amazing, though, to think how far Florida has fallen from the Steve Spurrier days, the Urban Meyer National Championship, Swamp Kings. That's out on Netflix. If you're a Florida fan and want to relive the glory days, that's the only good football you're going to see.
Yep.
I think many people are hoping Napier can turn it around. His recruiting's been okay. By the way, did you see? So Lane Kiffin stole a quarterback recruit from Napier, and then Kiffin posts on Twitter a Tom Petty album cover because that's what they sing in the swamp. Yes. Savage.
Well, with these social medias, you can kind of poke the bear without ever getting in their face,
Lane Kiffin is the best at that, isn't he?
He's pretty good at it, yeah.
I would take Utah there in the points at home.
I think so, too.
I'm just, Anthony Richardson is gone.
Yeah.
I tell you what, if Florida, though, could somehow upset them, the trajectory may look different. People may have to take them seriously. I just don't know what they're going to have, and right now I don't think they have much. Colorado, Dion, here we go. Prime going to the team that was in the national championship last year. They've lost a lot of players, though, and they did get their butts whooped. But TCU's a 20-point favorite. I mean, again, yes, take them. I don't think Dion has a team, does he?
You need to see what they come out there with first before you make any real assumptions on what they're able to do.
So we continue now. UTSA at Houston, a fun little game. And remember, the Roadrunners, they've got quite the little team out there, and Houston's only a 2.5-point favorite. If I had to pick an upset, and this may be on my Brett's best.
Okay.
Give me UTSA plus 2.5.
Okay.
Just an early look there.
Gotcha.
That's a fun little game.
Oh, yeah.
The primetime game here on ABC, night 1, North Carolina at South Carolina. Now, Mac Brown is favored going into Shane Beamer. That surprises me, but he's got that quarterback, Drake May.
Yep.
Shane Beamer, though, ended the year by beating Tennessee and beating Clemson. They're on a little bit of a run. Mac's favored, but not by much. What do you think of that game? That's a fun one, isn't it?
It is a fun one, and I think Mac's got it in him. I think he's got the horses behind him, and I would be I'd be riding with North Carolina on this.
Okay, interesting. I don't know. It's Ed Williams-Brice. I may go the other way.
Okay.
It's such a small line, though, and we're going to have the summer to sort it out.
Yes.
We need to see what fall camp looks like. But here's one, too, West Virginia at Penn State. Normally I stay away, but I don't think West Virginia has much. I like everything about the Penn State team that's coming back. Again, I don't know that we can win the big ones. I also wouldn't be surprised if we dropped a weird conference road game. Again, keep an eye on Illinois, but I like them here to cover the 19.5. I mean, it's there's a lot of hype around this team. They're going to be charged up. It's opening night. It's prime time. It's a fun little rivalry renewed. I just don't think West Virginia has the horses here.
Yeah, and it's almost like a line you'd see against a Youngstown State or something on opening weekend.
Correct.
That makes me a little gun shy, but I think even Dan kind of hammered the point. West Virginia is not a good football team, right?
They're not, and I think Neil Brown needs to make some noise or he's going to be gone. So
you got to get 3 touchdowns on him, I believe.
I think so, and I think it can be done, especially at home in front of that crowd with the running backs and the O-line and the defense that we have. Mark it down. I'm taking them, and I'm not worried about it for once.
Hammer it.
Hammer it down. All right, that is going to do it for us. Remember, you can find us here wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. You can email us, weatherwagers@gmail.com. We certainly hope to hear from you. David, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Coming up, when Dan gets back in a few weeks, we're going to pick season win totals. We're going to look ahead to more lines for week 1. But that's a wrap. Dave, appreciate it. As we head to the break here and we say goodbye for the rest of the week, we want to remind you again, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube. We have a lot of you watching. And you can always find us at abc27.com. That's Weather Wagers. Dave, give a shout out. Say goodbye.
Bye, everybody.